From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome to You Should Know. I'm your host, Evelyn Ledbetter, and my guest today is Mike Terry. And Mike, you do a combination of different things. I'll let you just tell a little bit about that real quick.
Well, I appreciate you having me in. I am a retired educator and went into selling real estate just to have something to do. Couldn't sit around the house and selling real estate at Buena Vista down there with the Merrick family. But my hobby is beekeeping, and that's what I would like to share with you today.
Awesome. That's amazing. And how did you get started with the beekeeping part?
Well, it was something that my dad kind of had an interest in, and so he kind of shared it with me, and I started researching it. We didn't get it done during that time, but later on, I just thought, well, hey, it's just, the more I studied it and researched it, the more interested I was, and therefore, I just told my wife, I said, I'm fixing to order some beehives, and she kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and she's probably right, but I've enjoyed the hobby anyway. So.
I always joke, I know I'm crazy, but sometimes I'm crazy. So truly, I think the bees are such an interesting creature, and the more you read about them and the more you talk about them, it brings up more and more questions.
Well, that's true, and a lot of people ask me about the process of setting up a beehive and of keeping bees, and so this gives me kind of an opportunity to share with others, because I know there's somebody out there that says, I've always had an interest,
right.
Or maybe they don't have an interest before, but after today, maybe that they will.
Well, I'm one of those. It's always been interesting. With us being in agriculture, bees are such a big part of the pollination process, and so I've had an interest. My father-in-law kind of got started with it before he passed.
Right.
And this is something I would be interested in the future. So how did you get started?
Well, I got started, like I say, I started doing research, and it's becoming more popular now than it was about 15 years ago, but it was very hard to find anything. And I finally found a way to order some bees, and they delivered them to Roswell. And so I ordered my first set of bees, started setting up my equipment, getting everything ready, but there were no beekeepers in this area. So actually the closest beekeeper that I could find was in Albuquerque, and I had to travel to Albuquerque to kind of get him to show me a little bit about what I needed to know before my bees actually came in.
How long ago was that?
That would be about 15 years ago.
So not near as much information on the internet and things like.
Oh, nowadays, now you can go onto YouTube and just, you can watch videos all day long. And every time you think you know something, watch another video. There are Facebook groups. There's a Facebook group here on the Portales Clovis area. We're not as active on it as we used to be, but maybe High Plains Beekeepers. You can go on there and reach out if you have any questions that need answered, or maybe you're having problems with bees. Sometimes we're able to help with problems, and sometimes we're not able to.
Okay.
But we're always willing to help and answer any questions that we can.
But that was a lot of resources that when you started wasn't there.
No, correct. Like I say, I had to travel to Albuquerque to find a gentleman that was there, and I think by the time I got there, I had some other meetings, and so I worked him in, and I think I was only with him for like an hour, 2 hours. So when you think the trip, but now there's enough, there are other beekeepers in this area that there's a lot of knowledge that can be shared.
Well, and I think when you have a passion for something, you just enjoy talking about it, and you love to share that information.
Oh, absolutely. I had a beekeeper friend, and he'd been in it for many, many years, and I was just learning. He was living in Roswell, and I would call him, and I always felt bad because I felt like I was taking up his time, and I asked him, I said, well, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk about bees? And his reply was always, well, if you twist my arm, I got time. And that's hard enough. And so then we'd go for bees 30, 45 minutes on the phone. So
that's really cool. You've probably built friendships and all kinds of things.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so you have a bee box, or what do you call it?
Well, you have a brood box and everything, and these frames are fitting inside that brood box. And this kind of shows you the different stages of it. Each box will hold 10 of these. So this one would be the beginning stage, which it is typically is just plastic. There is a waxy film on it, and all it does is kind of give them a little bit of encouragement on where to build and to tell them this is a good place for a home. These are in different stages that of wax buildup.
Can we pull this?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's even fascinating is because bees will rebuild it, but it takes 10 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So you want to preserve the wax as much as you can.
Meaning for nutrition.
Correct.
The bee
when
has
they're
to have...
using that, they're using up 10 pounds of honey
Wow.
to build 1 pound of wax. And wax doesn't weigh a lot. But as you just reach out there and push on how sturdy that is, you think it's pretty delicate. But it is a very solid container that they're using for the process of all the way up from laying eggs in to storing the honey in.
Okay, and you said this was kind of like a look through. So the beginning one and this one is one that's been used longer?
This one would be one that they have probably used for honey because you can see how clean that it is. It's a fresher, whiter one. This one is just here in the back. You can see that it is an older frame. You can see that it... And part of this may even be just dirt from their feet and travel as they come in.
Not in New Mexico.
Not in New Mexico. The wind never blows in New Mexico. But you can see the cleaner and the older wax, and ever so often you have to replace that wax, but you want to keep the wax as good as you can. So each box holds 10 of these, and the queen will lay her eggs and will surround it with pollen and honey. So probably this area right in through here, like a horseshoe, is where she laid her eggs and everything. And then around here where the cleaner is probably where she had honey. Now, the queen doesn't do the honey, but the worker bees figure out pretty quick that if we've got a family to feed here in the middle, we want a food resource around them all the way around the outside. And so then they will put that honey around the outside and make it available for the fresh bees.
So when the bees are going out and gathering that honey, how do they, is it on their legs that they get the pollen?
It is.
They don't get the honey, they're getting the pollen.
They're getting the pollen, and they'll bring it back. And the different bees will have different flowers will have different colors of pollen.
Well, that makes sense.
Some will be a white, some are yellow, some are red. You can actually get a pollen chart off of the internet, and you could get an idea of what the bees are bringing in. But they bring it in on their legs, and it looks like a poodle, where you've seen those little fluffy poodles that have got those legs puffed out. But when they bring that pollen in, that's what they're doing. And then they will store it inside these frames. And inside these frames, you'll be able to look and see that pollen. And then in time and effort, they convert it to honey.
Do they shake, or how do they get that pollen to fall off of their legs? Do you know?
That's a good question that I can't really answer.
Okay.
There are people that collect the pollen. I do not, because I want the bees to have all of the resources that they can. But they groom it off. And I don't know whether they groom it off themselves or if other bees take it off. That's a good question.
Right.
But that pollen gets packed into these cells, which are hexagonal shape, and then as they need it, and then they convert it to honey.
Do you know the process of how they do the conversion to honey?
That is something, the bees take it inside their body, and they have 2 stomachs. And so as they'll eat that pollen, and I can't get into a lot of this because I don't know. The
science of it.
But they convert it out, and then they actually regurgitate that bee. So some beekeepers and people will say, well, that's bee vomit, but it's actually honey. And it is the only food produced by insects.
That's fascinating. Well,
and it will last up to 2,000 to 3,000 years, and it will never get old. It may crystallize, but it will never get old. You never have to throw it away. You may have to warm it up just a little bit to get the crystals, but it's always good.
I knew I'd had people that had talked about they had a jar of honey that had gotten old and it wasn't good, and they threw it out, and I about had a heart attack.
Oh, I know.
It's like, just set it in a hot pan of water.
Correct.
And just let it heat up, and it's fine.
Yeah, that's the best way. You don't want it to be boiling water, because the nutrients within that honey are beneficial to the body. Some people will take it for allergies, for health benefits, in addition to the fact that it is a natural sweetener. But a lot of people will contact me, and they're looking for honey for allergies.
And is that factual? I have heard that it's when you live in an area, and if you do suffer from allergies, if you consume the honey, it helps you to become more resistant to the pollen that's in that area.
There's a lot of medical research that will go with that. For it to be considered a local honey, it needs to be within 15 miles of where you live. Now, some say, well, if it's the same environment, the same desert temperature, the same plants and everything, that you can expand that area. but a true local honey should be within 15 miles. Now, as you look at the processed honey in larger grocery stores,
Right.
a lot of times that has been filtered or heated for to get some of the
Like
to
the,
cleanly. It makes
right.
it easier. It keeps it from crystallizing it. But by doing that, they have taken some of the nutrients out, and it's not the same as it is finding from a local beekeeper.
And what I find is I always buy my honey if I can from the Hondo Valley up by Ruidoso, and it's the apple blossom.
Correct.
And I can literally taste a difference between the sweetness of it versus some that it may be bees that are on sage and different plants around in our area.
And that is what is so amazing, is because you would think honey is honey, but it is dependent upon the pollen in the area that they're in. Some will be like nearly a white, just nearly like a Karo syrup, just clear, clear, clear. And the next will be so dark it looks like molasses.
Right.
It all still has the same nutrients, but it depending upon which plant that it comes from.
What they're eating. So these are stored in the box. The frames are in the boxes. How many of the hives do you have?
Well, currently, right now, I got up to around 20, but because of the drought area here in Portales, it was getting hard to keep them all active. So I've cut down to about 5 to 10 hives is all that I'm keeping right now. And so as I give them time, they'll go through there, they'll fill up all of these frames either with honey or brood. It takes brood, which start as an egg, it'll go to a larva and then out, and then they'll hatch out. It takes about 21 days. And then as those populations, so early on in the spring, there will not be a lot of bees in a hive just because they don't reproduce as much during the winter. But during the spring and summer, it'll just be filled up with bees, and they'll be working, bringing in that honey. I'm sorry.
So is there one queen for each one of the beehives that you have? Like your 5 boxes, you'll have a queen in each one of those.
That's correct. There will only be one queen in each box. And if she either gets damaged or starts to where she's at a point she's not laying so many eggs, then they will replace her. And a lot of times beekeepers will be proactive about it, and they will replace her every 2 to 3 years because they want to have that high egg-laying ability from her.
Can you tell me the difference of what that queen bee looks like? How do you identify the queen compared to the worker bees?
Yeah, the queen it's very fascinating because the queen has a longer body, there's a video, hopefully we'll be able to get it shown, of the queen actually laying the egg in the cell.
Wow.
And it's not very common that you catch that. I just happened to have that frame pulled out and was watching her because it just fascinates me, and she actually lays eggs in the cell, and so to get to see that is quite amazing. But she will lay one egg in each one of those cells, and that's what happens. But it'll be between 1,500 and 2,000 eggs a day.
But she has a longer body?
Correct. The drone is more like your thumb. It's kind of rounded, and they don't have a stinger. A drone bee cannot sting you. Then the queen bee has a longer abdomen. The wings actually even go about halfway back. Because she doesn't do a lot of flying.
So they don't need that.
They don't need as much.
Extra wing.
And she needs to be able to contain as many eggs as she can. So she has a much larger abdomen.
So that's the reason for the bigger body.
Correct. And then your worker bee has the shorter body, but they are the ones that typically will do the stinging if need be. But they don't like to sting because typically when they sting, then they typically die after that. So their goal is not to die. Their goal is to keep the survival of the hive going. They only do it when they have to for either survival or to keep pests from bothering them.
So as a beekeeper, what all do you do to keep these hives going?
Okay. What I do is I set up that box. It's got 10 frames in it. I allow them to do their thing, to come and go. I temporarily or periodically will inspect them to make for sure that that the queen is laying, that she is there, that she didn't get killed during one of my inspections. I make sure that there is brood there. I make sure that the honey is going. When these 10 frames start to get full of either brood or honey, you don't want them to get honey bound, which means there's no place for them to lay. And then that is when I will add that second box up on top. If I can, you want to have boxes with honey or the wax already on it, because now instead of them going, oh, we've got to build 10 frames of wax, they already have it, and they can go to laying eggs in there and storing their honey. So that's an automatic jump start if you can keep that wax for them.
And so literally you have to keep enough honey in there. They've got to get enough when it's when you have
Correct.
pollen. So you don't want you don't want as many bees to feed through the winter.
Correct. So when it is time to harvest, I only harvest what I think is in excess of what they're going to need to get through the winter. And that is sometimes a tricky guess. Some people say one box with 10 frames is enough. Others say, well, you want to have 2 boxes with 20 frames to make for sure and give it. So if you go with that philosophy, then that third box would be the one that you would actually harvest honey from.
Uh-huh.
And anything in that third box is then what we would bottle and sell and do from there.
And in the wintertime, obviously you said you don't have as many bees. They're not collecting. She's not laying as many eggs. And then what I guess when the pollen becomes available is when they get busy. So what time of the year is that?
Well, in the spring when you start to see flowers is when the bee population starts to expand. And a lot of times the first flower may be a dandelion. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people consider dandelions to be a weed in their yard, but a dandelion is one of the first flowers that will actually bloom, and bees will go to that. And so that's always a good resource for them to get pollen from. So. And
when it's such a short life cycle on that bee
and
their season, so what temperature is it usually do they start getting active?
At 55 degrees. If it's below 55, typically they will not come out of the hive. And that's one of the things in our area lately, the past few years, we've had warm winters where we may get to 55, 60 degrees. And that's actually kind of hard on the bees because they come out thinking, hey, it's springtime, we need to get out and go to work. Well, they come out during the winter, there's no flowers, there's no food resources, and therefore they're using energy but not bringing in any. If they're cold, now a fact that I think is really fascinating is during the winter, they group up in a cluster around that queen, and they'll keep the inside of that cluster around 90 degrees.
By doing what?
By what they will do is they will disengage their wings and they'll shake their body, just like shivering that we do to keep warm. And they will shiver their bodies around there and keep her warm. Then those from the center will move to the outside. Those from the outside will move to the inside, and they just keep cycling. So that way everybody gets a chance to stay warm. But all that time they're protecting the queen. Now, when it gets warm, that's when they engage their wings, and they will flap their wings. They'll go to the front of the hive and they'll flap their wings, and it's like air conditioning, and they're circulating the hive and keep cooling it down during the heat.
So when you're checking these frames during the summer and you don't see the larva in there and you start thinking we don't have a queen anymore, is there a way to get a queen?
You can purchase queens, or you can, if they have not started a queen cell, you can go to another hive and get a frame that has eggs in it that are 1 to 3 days old and bring it back. And then they realize, hey, we're short a queen. We need to go to building one, and they will grow their own queen.
So that's one of the benefits of having other beekeepers in the area.
Correct.
You can share, because I'm sure you're just so devastated when you open up a box and it's dead. Like there's nothing in there.
It is. And so then if, for example, if this was hive 1 was really full of bees and this was hive 2 was low on bees, I can't just grab these bees and move them over because they know that, hey, you don't belong here, and the fight will be on. But if you use like essential oils or smoke, blow a little smoke on there, and they can't figure out were you an old bee or a new bee, and then they will mix. And so you can sometimes introduce extra bees to a hive that is struggling. So
when you're working with your hives, what protective do you? Hopefully you wear protective equipment.
I don't as much as I should, but yes, these are lambskin gloves that we have here. Most beekeepers will use those. That helps to protect your hands and your arms and everything. The thing that I don't like about them, they're so bulky, and sometimes I end up squishing a bee. When you squish a bee, then you're setting off the alarm to the other bees that, hey, we're being attacked.
Oh, and so they go after you.
Right, so then they come after me. So a lot of times what I do is just those little latex painting gloves, or I've gotten to the point in my career where if I'm really careful, I can do it without gloves. But if I take somebody in the hive with me, I always make
So
sure
just
that they have some sort
so
of
even
glove.
like a heavier mill latex
Yeah,
glove.
just a latex glove.
And do you always wear something over your head?
You should always wear something over your head. This is just a jacket, and you can tell that it's been used for several years, and I try to rinse it out upon occasion. But they kind of get used to the smell, and it smells like them. Now, this is one of those that has 3 layers, and it's not as hot as the old cotton uniform.
So it's for
so
the
it breathes a little
So
bit.
for your benefit.
For my benefit, but it has 3 layers. It has mesh, then a comb or webbing in the middle, and then mesh again. So it's harder for them to get through there. But you should always wear something over your face, even if if you're messing with them at all, because you don't want to get stung on the face, and there's always the potential of getting stung in the eye. And so,
do you wear a hat or something over there to expand that? So
that's a good question. If you'll just wear your baseball cap, then that kind of pushes out that face mask, because what they do is they come to where they can tell that the soft tissue and your breathing is so as you breathe in and breathe out, they know that's typically where your soft tissue is. So they come typically to your eyes, your nose, your mouth, and
if the further away that netting is from your face, they can't sting through it.
The bill of your cap will push that out and keep it from your face. If it gets pushed up against your face, they can sting through that mesh, and
you know it.
You know it.
Even though you get stung.
Oh yeah.
On occasion, it's still no fun.
That's what when I go around to visit with the kids and the classes and everything, and the first questions that they always ask is, do you ever get stung? And that answer is always yes.
Right.
And then the other question is does it hurt? Yes, it always does. But I've been stung so many times that I do not swell up as much as I used to.
You've built resistance.
Because I've built up a resistance and tolerance. But that can change overnight. You can become allergic to the bee sting, be not today and be allergic tomorrow. And there are beekeepers that have to get out of the beekeeping business because they become allergic to it.
We're getting short on time, but I read a lot that there's a lot of things that are starting to affect bees, that our bee populations are going down, pesticides and things that are used. Can you tell about what do we need to be doing as just humans to help our bee population?
Well, I think as we live more healthy, then that will be better for the bees. The fewer chemicals that we can use, the better off. If you see bees, don't spray around there. Just know that your food is the same thing that they're using. They're using the pollen. You're getting the results of them pollinating that flower. And so therefore you want to use as few chemicals as you can. If you see bees, try your best not to spray them because it does throw out that life cycle.
And there are some crops that literally have to have bees put out in them.
Most fruits and vegetables, they will bring in hives of bees. They have commercial beekeepers, and all they do is bring in their bees to pollinate those crops.
I know we have done that when we have grown pumpkins, that they literally do not self-pollinate enough to have a good pumpkin crop.
Right.
And when we had apples, the same thing in the apple orchards, big things like that.
They're even trying to come up with a mechanical bee to replace the bees to pollinate the flowers, but how about we just keep nature involved and do that way. So.
We're down to like a couple of minutes, but the swarms also. Don't spray. Don't try to do anything to hurt those.
No, absolutely. You want to call a beekeeper if you can and let them come get them. That helps to keep them healthy. We come, and if it's in a tree branch, we can either scrape them off of that tree branch or cut the branch down and put it inside a hive. We take it back, and we keep the life cycle going that way. But when they're in that spot, they're probably the most docile that they will be. Just don't pester them. Just leave them alone, and let's
so
if
they want to call, what are some numbers?
They can call the 4-H Extension Office, which is located over there by the fairgrounds. They have a couple of numbers of people that will do it, or they can call me at 575-760-5291, and I'll come get them.
And you work at Buena Vista, so that's another way if they can't touch you. So call you when they see a swarm.
When they're all clustered up. Now, a lot of times people will see them coming around the trash cans. What they're doing is they're coming around for the soda. They're trying to get a free source. But when they're clustered up is when we can get them.
So if you see them around your house or something like that, keep those things away.
Right.
To get them away from your
You'll see them when you're watering your garden, and a lot of times because they come up there for a water because we're in drought typically. And so they'll come up there to get a drink of water. They're not coming to attack. They're coming to get a drink. But when you see them clustered up, that's when we want to get a call. And if you have any doubt, you can give us a call or send us a picture. And a lot of times from the picture, we can identify what your bee problem is.
Wow. fascinating information. Every time
Thank
I
you for
talk to
having
you,
me.
I just want to ask more questions, and it just builds. So thanks so much for coming
Thank you
in,
for
Mike.
having me. Appreciate you.
Definitely. Thank you. And for all of you watching, thank you. And we will see you next time. Cheers.